The historic bridge on the River Kwai was one of the railroad crossings targeted by the 7th Bomb Group during their bombing missions along Japan's supply routes to Burma. On the morning of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, 35 Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress bombers from the 7th Bomb Group were en route to Asia. Their mission was to support U.S. forces and Philippine Army Air Corps units during the Japanese raid. 8 of the B-17s landed at Hickam Field, but since their machine guns had been removed to reduce weight for the long Pacific journey, the confrontation was heavily one-sided. 3 B-17s were attacked and damaged by Japanese fighters, and one was set ablaze, becoming the first American B-17 destroyed in World War II. After the start of World War II, the 7th Bomb Group regrouped in Australia, with some units participating in the unsuccessful Allied defense of Java. The group was then deployed against the Imperial Japanese Army, which had taken over Thailand, Malaya, and Burma. Following the fall of Java, most American heavy bombers stationed in India were sent to the Middle East in June 1942 to halt German General Erwin Rommel's advance toward the Egyptian border. This left the 7th Bomb Group with 2 squadrons of North American B-25 Mitchell medium bombers and 1 squadron of B-17s. In August 1942, American military strategists decided to reorganize the 7th Bomb Group into 4 squadrons of heavy bombers. Brigadier General Clayton Bissell, the recently appointed 10th Air Force commander in India, determined that the B-17s were unsuitable for the China-Burma-India (CBI) theater due to their limited range. He requested that consolidated B-24 Liberators replace the B-17s. However, it would take several months for the B-24s to arrive in India because of high demand in the European theater. Meanwhile, a new base was being established for the 7th at Pandavaswar, India, and the group operated out of both Agra and Kolkata. In 1942, the Allied situation in the CBI was unstable. The British Army's attempt to defend Burma quickly failed, and the remnants withdrew to India, where the Japanese were already planning further expansion. The U.S. was still gathering forces and setting up the complex logistics needed for long-term operations. The Japanese Army faced unique logistical challenges in Burma. Supplies and equipment had to be transported by sea from Japan to ports in Burma and Thailand, a distance of 4,000 miles, plus an additional 2,000 miles of single-track railroad to the front lines in Burma. The dense forest in Burma provided cover and made it difficult to locate and combat the Japanese from the air. The primary objective for the 7th Bomb Group became disrupting Japanese communications and supply lines. Since there were no significant industrial targets outside the Burmese capital of Rangoon, the group focused on attacking the ports of Bangkok and Rangoon, as well as Japanese shipping routes. The 7th Bomb Group set bombing records, completing the longest mission of the war up to that point on December 19, 1943, with a 14 to 15-hour flight to Bangkok. The group also pioneered new bombing techniques, particularly targeting bridges to subvert Japanese supply lines. On November 1, 1944, the campaign to destroy bridges in Burma began. Edward M. Young, in his book B-24 Liberator Units of the CBI*, notes that bridges were notoriously difficult targets, with the 7th bombers achieving only 1 direct hit for every 81 sorties during the 1943 bombing campaign. The introduction of the American Smart Bomb, the 1,000-pound AZON bomb, which featured a radio-controlled tail fin, offered a solution. This allowed bombardiers to adjust the bomb's trajectory in flight. The AZON bomb could be directed left or right, though not in pitch. It was similar to today's Joint Direct Attack Munition, JDAM, though results were initially unsatisfactory. By November 1944, the group's B-24s were equipped with the necessary transmitters and antennas for using AZON bombs. The 7th Bomb Group also developed a new bombing technique, sometimes referred to as dive bombing in historical accounts, but more accurately described as glide bombing. This method involved gliding at a 20 to 25 degree angle from 1,500 feet and pulling up to release the bomb at 500 feet. A unique sight and a toggle switch on the control column allowed for precise detonation. On April 24, 1945, 41 liberators from the 4 7th Squadrons were deployed. 3 were equipped for glide bombing, and the 493rd Squadron carried AZON bombs. The operation was a success, with 30 bridges demolished and 18 damaged. Lieutenant Guilford Delhi, a B-24 bombardier, joined the 7th Bomb Group near the end of the war. The American and British fighter groups in India had achieved air superiority, although criticism remained severe. Forbes noted that flak could vary significantly depending on the location, ranging from very light to extremely heavy. During their missions, they never encountered a Japanese fighter. Not every mission focused on railroads, though all were long and challenging. Forbes's first and longest mission took him to Bangkok's dry dock, which had been previously shut down. He participated in an operation on March 19, 1945, targeting railroad bridges on the Singapore-Bangkok line. The mission involved 37 B-24s from all 4 squadrons of the 7th Bomb Group. Each aircraft could carry only 4 bombs, so extra fuel tanks were installed in 2 bomb bays to accommodate the long journey. Forbes recalled that flying at 400 feet was uncomfortably low for a B-24, making them easy targets. They had to deal with small arms fire, which severed 3 fuel lines in Forbes's plane. Despite the danger, they managed to find and repair the leak, though the risk of a spark causing an explosion was ever present. The mission was ultimately successful, destroying several key bridges. On March 22, 1945, Forbes's crew launched a bombing mission against Great Coco Island, located near the northern tip of the Andaman Islands. Normally, the northern bomb site was connected to the autopilot, allowing automatic course adjustments. However, due to a malfunction, the pilot had to fly manually. Forbes targeted 2 small radar-equipped vans, spaced half a mile apart, making 3 passes with 3 bombs, each time hitting the targets precisely. More than 70 years later, there remains some uncertainty about the fate of one of the 7th's most challenging targets, famously known as the bridge on the River Kwai. In reality, there were 2 bridges across the Kwai River. A wooden bridge, built by British prisoners of war, was destroyed by British commandos. Another concrete and steel bridge, completed in February 1943, was targeted but initially survived. The concrete and steel bridge, known as Bridge 277, was attacked twice in November 1943 but remained intact. On December 13, 1943, the 436th Squadron bombed the flak batteries protecting Bridge 277, but the structure endured. Finally, on February 13, 1944, B-24s launched an attack from 300 feet, successfully destroying 2 of the bridge's spans. Despite repeated attacks, the concrete bridge was resilient. By April 1944, photo reconnaissance showed that while the wooden bridge had sustained damage, it had been repaired and was operational again, even though the steel bridge remained inoperable. The 7th Bomb Group then turned its attention to the wooden bridge. On April 3, 1945, a B-24 Liberator from the 436th Bomb Squadron flew over the town of Kanchanaburi in Thailand, targeting the wooden bridge over the Kwai River. The aircraft, piloted by 20-year-old First Lieutenant Charles Linneman from Ashland, Virginia, was known to his crew as Curly. The mission had been briefed 8 hours earlier, and Linneman's B-24, followed by 6 additional B-24s, was tasked with making 3 bombing runs across the bridge. Each run involved dropping 2 1,000-pound bombs. Japanese anti-aircraft guns protected the bridge due to its importance. Flak suppression aircraft were sent ahead to drop anti-personnel bombs on the gun positions to silence them before Linneman's attack. The B-24s took off and flew southeast, passing over Kolkata, the Bay of Bengal, the southern edge of Burma, and heading into Thailand. Flying low to avoid radar detection, the aircraft encountered another plane, identified by its shape and size as a Japanese fighter. The tail gunner spotted the aircraft but was instructed not to fire unless it approached deliberately. The B-24 and the Japanese fighter flew side by side for 10 tense minutes before the fighter veered off and returned to Burma. In the darkness, the Japanese pilot may not have seen the B-24 clearly or decided against engaging it. Upon reaching Kanchanaburi, Linneman and his crew found that the flak suppression aircraft, which were supposed to precede them, had not arrived. Faced with a lengthy return flight to India and a need to conserve fuel, Linneman decided to proceed with the bombing run. The B-24 began its first run at 8:59 a.m. from 6,000 feet. As the aircraft neared the target, it came under anti-aircraft fire. The first two bombs were dropped, but only one detonated accurately, hitting the bridge and demolishing one of its spans. Linneman made another pass, but the next two bombs missed the bridge and fell into the river. On the third run, with the aircraft now bracketed by Japanese guns, the remaining three bombs were released. Despite these efforts, the B-24 sustained significant damage. The rear bomb bay doors were destroyed. A part of the right vertical stabilizer was missing, and 3 feet of the right wingtip disappeared. The ailerons were ineffective, and control was compromised. Linneman attempted to control the B-24 despite the lack of ailerons, managing to climb to 6,000 feet. Facing the daunting prospect of navigating over enemy territory back to India, he considered options, including heading to the Andaman Islands for potential supplies. Ultimately, he decided to try for Cox's Bazar, a British airstrip west of Akyab, Burma. Upon reaching Cox's Bazar, Linneman opted to attempt a landing on the beach rather than the runway. Given the risks, the approach was challenging, and as they neared the ground, the B-24 drifted towards sand dunes. Linneman had to make a quick adjustment, but at 155 miles per hour, the aircraft lost lift and crashed into a shallow dip. The crew quickly evacuated, and the B-24 was deemed unusable. Linneman was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for his efforts in safely returning the damaged aircraft and its crew. James Young summarized the 7th Bomb Group's achievements, noting that they dropped 13,165 tons of bombs in nearly 500 combat missions and transported close to 3 million gallons of fuel to China over almost 3 years. The group lost 71 aircraft in total, with 23 during gas hauling flights and 48 during combat missions. During the monsoon season of 1944, when severe weather hindered operations, the 7th B-24s were repurposed for transporting fuel over the Himalayas, known as the Hump. The aircraft, converted to tankers with their gun turrets removed, faced dangerous conditions including turbulence, ice, and rain. The risks of these missions were reflected in the aircraft losses, with more B-24s being lost during this period than in direct combat. The story of Linneman's B-24 mission highlights the extreme challenges and dangers faced by Allied aircrews during World War II. Despite the harrowing conditions and severe damage to his aircraft, Linneman's determination and skill ensured the survival of his crew and the partial success of their mission to destroy the vital wooden bridge at Kanchanaburi. The 7th Bomb Group's efforts were crucial in disrupting Japanese supply lines and contributing to the broader Allied war effort in the China-Burma-India theater. The achievements of the 7th Bomb Group, including their daring flights over the treacherous Himalayas to supply Chinese forces, exemplify the bravery and resilience of the airmen. Their sacrifices and successes had a lasting impact on the outcome of the war in Southeast Asia.